I'm very pleased to introduce our next segment. We have an amazing fireside chat. I think these folks here now don't need an introduction, but you guys might know Lloyd and Tamara here. Yeah! Give it up! I mean, and after this, we'll also, I'm pleased to say, we will have lunch. Yes, so stick around for that, of course. But I have no other words of introduction other than everyone give it up one more time for Lloyd and Tamara.
Thank you, Ian. Appreciate it. Hey, Tam.
Hi, Lloyd.
How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Good. Welcome to Fort Myers.
Yes, cold, rainy Fort Myers. Although we got a day of sun yesterday, and today
the sun
is shining.
And today we got some sun for sure. But you did get at least one day of sun while you were here.
I thank you for that.
Okay, good. Because I was afraid you brought the bad weather with you.
Wow, passing the buck, passing the blame to the Canadian.
That's right.
I might have brought a little cold here.
You brought a little cold air.
All right, I'll take partial responsibility.
You can only partial because we have another Canadian here with us today that I know she also brought some a little of the cold air down with her as well. So it was an amplification.
And she's a ginger as well. You got to watch out for those Canadian gingers.
So, this is, I was saying earlier today, Tam, that this is a year of collaboration. This is a year of growing who and what we are as a community. And, you and I have had this conversation a few different ways and a few different times, but I want to talk a little bit today about ecosystem mapping. I think this is a topic that more of us need to understand. If you don't know what the lay of the land is, how do you participate in it, right? And so earlier we were saying that, like, what do we do to bring in the next round of people who and give them a little less struggle to get in? And so, if you don't mind, can you just work with me through, like, how did you start in this ecosystem mapping space? Because you brought it in fairly early in the space here. So what does that look like for you?
Okay. Well, I have always been a sort of big picture thinker. I'm a big systems thinker, and maybe just like a simple woman. I like to see a picture of something before I'd like to get the lay of the land of something. So I don't even know how long ago it was. Could have been like 4 years ago. I was in Toronto and I met Don Tapscott, and some of you guys might know Don Tapscott. He wrote a bunch of books for blockchain. He wrote like a Wikinomics type, or I forget the name of his book, but he's written like several books. He has like 17 different books, and he's got really good blockchain enterprise type books. And I met him in Toronto, and he asked me to work on a paper for the World Economic Forum, and it was a paper on global solutions networks. And the premise of the paper was sort of like, there's this legacy world, right? And it's run by the former institutions that we all know and love, different governments, different nonprofit organizations, different financial institutions, including the SEC, including Standards and Poor and all of that stuff. And him and his team were actually exploring what does it look like for these new networks that are arising, these new governance networks that we don't quite fit into the standard legacy, I guess we'll call it Web 2 framework. Yeah, so he was starting in this paper to explore global solution networks, and particularly global solution networks for blockchains. So what is a global solution network? Basically, it's kind of similar to the ecosystem mapping activity. He started to think about what are the different sort of pockets of things that arise when you're governing a large group of people. A bunch of resources, essentially. So he had watchdog networks. He had platform networks over here. He had different types of networks all over the place that he would define. And and then he had me go in and actually go through the blockchain world at that time, do research, and kind of map the different blockchain groups to these different types of networks. He even had diaspora, like basically displaced people as well. He had global institution networks and all of that. So having done that activity, it's really cool to see my research, because like actually after 4 years, a lot's changed. So some of these things just don't exist anymore. So, but some of these things actually do. And there were a lot of working groups back in the day as well. Like the interesting part about blockchain is that people don't realize like the evolution of it has been happening for a decade, over a decade. And it's been pretty cool to kind of see that. But now we're seeing like sort of the refinement. Anyway, I'm digressing. I'm going to get back to the point here. So I just was like, this is so cool. Like he's actually mapping a new way that can kind of layer over those sort of legacy networks. And we can kind of figure out how can we govern ourselves sort of in a new way, and how can we create these sort of neural networks or business networks or platform networks in a new way that doesn't quite map onto the legacy world? Because the point is, what we do is an extension of the legacy world. It's not. We're not necessarily competing with it. I always use the updating the system. We're updating their systems. And the interesting part was too, if you go to look at the legacy world and map it, because I was trying to compare the new world with the old, like it's really hard to find those damn maps. I'm like, well, that's fascinating. Why don't we know how the legacy world, where's their maps? I want to see how the global financial infrastructure works. And then I'm like kind of naive at that time. And people were telling me, well, maybe they don't want you to know how this works. Yeah,
exactly.
Like I'm always the one in the room that's like, why don't we have this, sir? And they're like, yeah, it's usually obfuscation for a reason.
Right.
So it just got me thinking in that modality. I just thought it was really clever, Don's work. And that's kind of like what inspired me to think about these systems sort of in a new way.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Tam. And that's just it. Like the way you said it there, these things have been going on for very sparkly.
I'm sorry, I have to take a minute for my bottle. Look at how cool that is.
That is a very sparkly bottle.
I don't usually bedazzle things, but I didn't bedazzle this, by the way.
I was going to say that would take quite a bit of time to individually.
Like, how amazing is that? It makes me want to drink more water. So we use what we can to incentivize ourselves
to do the
good
right
behavior.
thing.
Yeah, I'm like, it's like an accessory now. My water.
You can't be evil there. You have to drink your water, right?
Exactly.
So
you get it.
But so, as you were saying there, these legacy systems, they are mapped. Sure, they are. But the people that understand the mappings keep that information as private as possible. Again, so what are we doing here in this space? We're trying to open it up. We've taken note that when that information is closed off and we don't have access to it, we can't all act upon it.
Exactly. I call it like digital wayfinding as well. It's like it's like when you're onboarding to an ecosystem, it's so confusing. We all know this. I mean, I'm confused and I've been in it for 10 years. I'm always like, okay, like the other day, my team sent me links to this forum and then there's this forum over here. And they're like, what the hell? Like it's just a whole bunch of websites and a whole bunch of people doing stuff, but there's nothing to really link it together. And the point is, no one institution, in my opinion, and as Charles has said, and as we are building, no one institution should own that sort of state, right? And so that's where sort of this idea of self-reporting ecosystem maps, and we'll go more detail into exactly what I mean by it. So that's where that sort of came into play. New people entering a system, they need to know what to do, where to go, and what value this system actually has as well, which you can capture. I think these are all hypotheses, by the way, but I do think you can capture gross network value vis-a-vis these ecosystem maps as well.
Okay, so I want to put a pin in that one. The gross value gross network value.
It's like GDP of a country,
Like a
but
GDP,
what's our network value? Like everyone's always like, okay, well, should I go to this ecosystem or this ecosystem? But legacy folks, so like they have these metrics. They've got GDP to measure a country's value. If you look at what the capital markets use in order to measure value, they've got a whole bunch of different the equity. They've got their coin market cap for in the equities markets and everything. But we don't really know because there's qualitative and quantitative metrics. Like we got to be smarter here. It's like quantitative metrics, I think we can get to. Awesome. But the qualitative stuff too. And I'm not saying I know what all the qualitative metrics are, but those should be equally important as well. And you and I think I've talked a little bit about this as well.
We have. And that's, I mean, I can say on the budget process when we were going through and we were doing that, that was one where we were like, we must have these qualitative questions in the survey because we're doing ourselves a disservice if we don't. And sure enough, insights were gained. And so that's the other side of this that is also very interesting. We're not just helping people come in and find their place, but we're also giving people tools to measure.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. We're giving tools to measure. So ecosystem. So what is it then? Like just to bring it down a little bit further into reality and what have we done? So IO, when we say IO, it's like Tam has an idea. This is really cool. But I wanted to do it via Intersect. As Adam and all you guys know, I like doing stuff through it, not through IO, these types of things. I did it through Intersect with Ben and team. And I think you were even involved.
Sure.
Yeah, you're always there.
I'm there too often.
Lloyd is always there. And we set up a working group and we started interviewing some folks, so dApp developers, different types of profiles within it. And we started to, firstly, we read all the literature on the ecosystem. So ecosystem literature is quite limited, actually. So there's different types of ecosystems. Let me bring it back one step. There's purpose ecosystems, which Cardano is. I believe AI should also be deemed a purpose ecosystem. That means no one owns the platform, right? And the platform, like Amazon, is a business, an enterprise ecosystem. There's a real platform there, a business platform that somebody owns. Bezos and friends, and they kind of control the value that comes in and out, right? So there's enterprise and business ecosystems. IO's building a venture ecosystem. We'll kind of like own and control whatever platform I build for that to build that ecosystem. But a purpose ecosystem, nobody owns that, and that's always been our head scratchy problem. That's why it's like CF versus Intersect, and why is Intersect doing the budget? But all you guys here is like preaching to the converted. We know that there's now no owner. So congratulations on the hard fork. And soon we'll have the Constitution passed, and soon we'll have our first budget passed. But no one owns that. People vote on it.
Right.
So we read all the literature in ecosystem, and it documented like platform systems. That's your standard platform business model, like Uber. And these ecosystem models, though, are different. Value flows in a different type of way, and purpose ecosystems are quite different. Then we started to, and I'm told there's going to be the map. It's in the Telegram channel. No, that's okay.
That's right. That's right. We did get out on the Telegram channel. So if you guys check the Telegram channel, you can actually see the map there.
So what the team did first was just like, this is just standard, TAM, SAM, SOM, like in the standard business. We mapped like the type of roles that could exist within the ecosystem. And I think we came up with 65 different roles. There can be an innovator role, a builder role. They're quite generic. Then we started mapping the actors. Mm-hmm. And actors are people like IOHK, people like Liquid, people like Mel, people like you. Actors can play several roles within the ecosystem. And then we started to even map, like, once you see a map, and then once you can understand the different categories of roles, and sectors is the other component of it. Obviously, there's different verticals, there's different sectors. This is, again, just standard business language, right? There's the NFT world, there's the DeFi world, there's the governance world, and all of these things are different components, sectors, areas of Cardano. We started mapping them, and then I do believe eventually we had a spreadsheet where we're starting even to like map the value and value flows between different actors. We're not quite there again yet because we've handed this over to you guys. But on the map that you'll see in the Telegram channel, it just kind of shows that map. And I think there was even debate about the SIP process. They're like, well, why isn't the SIP process here? SIP process is a process, but you can still map the roles of people that do the SIP stuff. Now, the idea is, and I'm going to throw this out to folks. It's not like this doesn't exist in the legacy world. Anybody that's ever used a Bloomberg terminal, and I've played around with a Bloomberg terminal before, you will see that a Bloomberg terminal does these types of things in the legacy world. What a Bloomberg terminal does, firstly, it's expensive. So you have to pay $25,000 a year to access the Bloomberg terminal. It's owned by Bloomberg and Friends. You see a trend here, right? Bloomberg and Friends own that. Okay. But it's just a big data warehouse. And what it is actually as well, it's a communication network. So you can think ecosystem. If we could eventually build this ourselves, it creates a communication network between those fancy finance people. They literally have an internal marketplace in Bloomberg where you can buy and sell your Patek Philippe watches and stuff and your like fancy Lambos and stuff. So it's a communication network. It also is an analytics network where people, and I know we have analytics platforms already in Cardano and everything, but it has it has profiles of people. So big influencers inside the legacy world, Bloomberg has, and this is what ecosystem mapping can do. And I know that the dReps are starting to explore it. And thank you, dReps. That's really cool. Like, I like the fact that we're starting with one sector or one role, really, and sector.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a governance sector and the role of the dRep, right?
Yes.
And I want to also point out here, this is kind of an interesting because you bring up the Bloomberg terminals. One of the most important things, why did the Bloomberg terminals become where they are? Why did they become the quintessential tool of the financial community?
Why, Lloyd?
Do you know that story?
Well, I want to hear.
Okay.
I want to hear from you.
Okay, so it is because in the very earliest days of these terminals being available, they were given to all of the new. It was a gift. You get this terminal as a new finance person, so you would have access to this tool in your earliest days, and of course you would pay your usage as you became. And so access is the single most important point, because the reason that terminal became popular is because everyone that had started out in the finance sector had that terminal and used it.
Did they have the hardware early on? So the interesting thing about Bloomberg too, they actually, so security wise, they actually have their own hardware as well. They have their own keyboard, for Pete's sakes, which is, we're a bunch of nerds. I think that's pretty cool. I already have 2 keyboards, but another keyboard I just think that's cool. But anyway, they started with the hardware.
Yes. Absolutely.
Didn't know that.
The hardware, they started with the hardware, gave it to them, put it in their hands right away, because that was the way that they ensured that tool became the dominant tool for that industry. So again, access is everything. It's just, if nothing else, the lesson we have to take from the Bloomberg terminals is we have to make our tooling extremely accessible, get it in everyone's hands as fast as we can.
Exactly. But then comes down to incentives.
Yes.
So what incentivizes people to share their information? Like in Bloomberg, it's important to be seen. I mean, these are public companies and private company data, and a lot of it's self-reported. Obviously, public company data is mandatorily self-reported. You have to share your information. But it became that if you didn't have this, you don't know your ecosystem, your financial ecosystem. And the terminal, I just think, is a really interesting thing that you guys can look at in the working group and just kind of deconstruct what they did, and sort of like what you're saying. And I love that the dReps are starting with this. What did they do, and how do you build up from that and make it useful for people? That's going to be the biggest thing. It has to be useful. People will provide their data, shielded data, plug midnight. I'm wearing my midnight socks today.
Look at those. Yes.
There you go. I know it's like not so fashionable, but like so cute. Midnight's swag game is amazing. But yes, it's about making it as useful as reasonably possible for people, and then build up from there.
Absolutely. So this is, I mean, this is such an interesting journey that we're on, and I think that we've kind of walked through a little bit of how we got here. What was the process that did it, but along the way, what were some of the headaches that you started to uncover? Like, what are some of the, what are the things that that are going to be the challenges. The touch points, I like these challenge touch points because we've got a room full of people who are problem solvers. So when we start talking about the problems in public, we start to be able to get their brains moving, and we start getting help on what the answers are for those touch points. So what are the pain points right now? What are the things that we still are struggling with that we need the most help with right now? What's that part look like?
Well, you're right about that. Like, I mean, plug to the budget process. I did get a little peek into like where you guys are at in the budgeting, because you're on the budget committee. You are?
Well, I'm an SME for the budget committee,
Right.
so
I mean, the problem always is like patience of people and just healthy dialogue. I feel like that's so the problem. And just, I know this seems like kind of known to you guys. There's just so much information out there. So it's information overload. That's number one. So how do you get people to even understand this? The first time I got to introduce the concept was at our product backlog workshop that I ran early in the year. And it only got a brief, like it was just even explaining it to people. So that's one of the biggest problems. I'll go into like actual problems in a second, but like it's always with Cardano and any ecosystem in any company. It's just how do you explain all the things that are going on? It's like, okay, now we got this ecosystem stuff. Is that going to be too confusing for people because we just got the constitution? Is it too soon? I think it's a timing thing as well. Like I realized just kind of building it up quietly last year was good. And now we're getting into the budgeting process. And now we're going, like, it's amazing, guys. I also have to say this. It's amazing that we're even doing this, like the budget process. Like it's hard for me and the company in IO, just getting all of our budgets together. Like I want to, my head, it's hard because there's different interests and competing interests and all that stuff. So the fact that we're even doing the budgeting process and where we've got to, and I know that there's still a few more debates, that's absolutely amazing. But I think it's bringing this in, solving immediate problems. Charles will say this about me. I'm like, I sometimes skip to the future, and it's like, really, what are the immediate problems we need to solve? And the dReps, it just worked. I mean, the system emerged and it worked. And the dReps were like, okay, well, we have a problem. We can't find each other. What are we going to use to find each other? What are we going to use to document our current positions? How are we going to start to build that like tiny little ecosystem amongst each other? So they've picked up this idea. It's really just a framework, an ecosystem framework. They've picked up this idea and they're going to start prototyping and building slowly. They've solved the problem. So when you say what's one of the problems, I think they've solved that problem. I think this ecosystem mapping is really nice to have, and it will honestly set us apart once we keep building and building and people keep self-reporting and building it up. I think it just takes time in the timeline. I think we have to focus right now on the budgeting process, of course, and get that understood first. It's interesting though, when you guys read the budgeting, like it's not rocket science, right? Like when you do think about it, when you're like think about a company or whatever, it's like there's stuff you spend things on. And I think the categories that they've come up with on Cardano Core, like we have to build the thing, like the blockchain, right? Blockchain can't break. Let's build blockchain. Let's spend some more money building the blockchain, right? And then innovation. And it's really just getting people though to wrap their minds around, you got to spend some money on this first in order for it to keep going. And then we can look at more refined things like building this beautiful self-reported ecosystem map. Like I envision a world where we can all see each other. Like holacracy, I know, bad word, but like they built this like beautiful tool called Glass Frog where you can actually see each other. Like you can see you can have several roles, like I said, in holacracy and in ecosystem. So it could have like a picture of you that does like a bazillion things. And like in this actual, it's kind of like collaboration software where you can actually see Lloyd, see all your connections in real time, understand your several different roles, understand how to reach out to you, your communication modality. And then, of course, guys, it just goes without saying, you start to build reputation, right? So there's going to be several different tools that I see to build these ecosystem. It's not just maps. Maps are just, a map is just a map. It's a GUI, it's an interface, but it's the stuff that goes on behind it and how it all connects in an operating system that's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, because it's going to be hard. Like, if my role changes tomorrow, if I'm doing something different from, budget SME, which I'm doing now, but, that role will go on for a period of time, but then I'll move on to something else. I may be working on a different part of the ecosystem. So what will be important is to make it very easy to update that, so that our different participants can see where we're at now and where we've been. That's where the reputation comes in, is that idea of over time we'll be bubbling up. We need to be able to have reputation, given that when you're here in this room, there should be a
Yes.
proof that you participated in this event is one of those many things. So some of it could be automatic. If you have an NFT that's proof of attendance somewhere, well, then that just goes in your roadmap automatically because it's on chain. We talked about that earlier, right? The idea that it's represented on chain, and when it's there, we can just pull it into the GUI. It's just available to all of us, and that's the point of it being public. So,
Yeah, and that's on the individual level. So that's Lloyd as an individual. And I'm just going to kind of keep structuring this out for you guys. That's Lloyd as an individual, which is part of an ecosystem. And then maybe there's Lloyd as a company. There's a company behind Lloyd. So that's a new actor that might actually participate in several roles, might have several roles in different sectors even. You see how it can layer up and start to, so it's not just, so you still maintain some of your own individuality as well, because there's people behind companies, as we all know. And so it can just like kind of build up from there and scale up from there.
beautiful. And so, and bringing it back into the budget a little bit, which is fine. I love that we're talking about this as well, because it is a function of the ecosystem. It's something we absolutely have to do. It's a product, if you will, that we're going to have to put out, and we have to put out on a regular basis. And there will be participants and roles within that. So that all still, again, maps to this process.
Yes, it does. And you just reminded me of one thing. So once you see the map and then you see all the different roles, and then you can actually figure out what is missing in our ecosystem as well. And like the Bloomberg Terminal, you can also see, like, you can click on something like Apple in a Bloomberg. I love Bloomberg terminals. I really want one, Charles, please. I just want a Bloomberg terminal. I keep asking for it, and the finance guys get to have it, but the president doesn't get to have it. I'm just kidding. I'll get my own little terminal. But you can click on Apple, and you can it literally shows you their entire supply chain and like the entire flow of value. And then you can click on like even natural disasters. You can click on something and it can show you. I mean, we're going to be experiencing risk, macro and microeconomic risk, right, correlated to the legacy market. You'd be able to click on that. Again, this is like long-term type of stuff, but I'm just saying, like, that's where this thing could emerge to eventually for Cardano. And then you can create interoperability, obviously, with other ecosystems, because there's going to be other actors from other ecosystems. Midnight, obviously, is our interoperability blockchain for Cardano. You can start to very easily see, and then you're going to be able to map the different value flows between our ecosystems as well, because as you said, we're in the age of collaboration and we're in the age of interoperability. One final thing too, because everyone's always like, oh, we hate the CF, IO hates the CF. We don't. We just want to know what they do and what they don't do. So on an ecosystem map, we'll be able to easily see, okay, I guess they're a venture studio now as well. So you'll be able to like see the different things that they do, right? And you'll be able to see, okay, you'll be able to map how much ADA people have, as far as disclosures go, and you'll be able to actually see how many roles they play. Are they saturating the market? Like, it just gives people that like clarity. Everything should just be, I mean, we got to fix the legacy world, right? So everything should be as clear and transparent with the necessary obfuscation of data protection. And we all, again, I'm preaching to like a very intelligent audience here. Like, we know where that line is, I think, with data protection. I mean, business requires it. We're not all just going to lift the kimono and just show each other everything. So there is that aspect, but we'll figure it out as we go. And another thing for ecosystems as well, it's really important. And Juan the One and I were just talking about it. It really does work, Juan. Yeah, Juan the One. And we're always talking about culture. We always talk about culture. It's just what we talk about at IO too. Culture is one of the most important things. And I think we've solved culture at IO. Yeah, Charles always talks about our Glassdoor reviews. Don't read them. They're all lies. I'm just kidding. Some of them are true, but most of them are lies. But anyway, we've solved the culture problem too. And I think that the ecosystem needs to, we said solve problems. We need to elevate culture. I think that dReps are doing something with a culture code. Is that accurate?
So this is another one of those that I'm like I get deep on this one. I'm also a culture guy. That's like, oh, that's just it's where I get going. And like I keep saying now, we need a culture of iteration. That is one of the things. So in our space, where with Cardano as an ecosystem, that's one of the things that, like you were saying earlier, you touched on it when you're like, we have to explain to people, they have to understand that it costs money to do these things, and that we have to find the processes and we have to build them. Well, you don't get there without a culture of iteration. It's not built at one
That's
time.
a value. That's a
It
cultural
is
value.
cultural value, and we don't get there unless we have that understanding. Unless we as a community approach something and go, okay, is it good enough for now to get to the next iteration?
70%. So we just actually established one with my executives. We just established a code of conduct amongst each other, and Charles actually threw that one out. 70% is basically what you're saying. 70% is good enough.
Yep.
Move on.
Yep.
I can't, by the way, I cannot abide by that one. Like, I have a problem. I'm like a type A, like, no, but it's broken a little bit. But no, you're right. That's a cultural value. And so you can set the macro, I think. For our company, we've set macro cultural values, right? They're just things to abide. But then what we've done is we're a company, so we can do these things. We allowed each of our sub teams to define their own culture and ways of working. You can never have a monoculture. That would be stupid and ridiculous. There could be, though, several tenets, and we have tenets in the Constitution anyway. So there's constitutional tenets, which kind of weave into culturally type things, but then there could be more.
Yeah. And that's what how do we get there? How do we establish leaders in our space that will, that we help them, we encourage them, we enable them, we grow them, within our space? How do we do that together so that, because there's no way that just even the group of people in this room, we can't do it all. There's no way. So each of the people in this room needs to bring more people around them. So this is the ecosystem growing over time. And so what are the steps that we can start to take? And I think that's what we can get to now, is what do these next steps look like, Tam? So we've been kind of saying that all day today, right, guys? Like, what's the next steps? So for you and for IO, for the ecosystem map, what are our next steps? What are we looking at?
Okay, well, for the culture component, I strongly suggest setting up a collaboration group. So in IO, we have collaboration circles, is what I call them. So somebody needs to do it, and not me, of course. I can join because I have a lot of insight on culture, but somebody needs to set it up inside of Intersect, a working group. I think it'll be, honestly, guys and gals, one of the most fun, but also important, and I think one of the most subscribed to. I mean, you guys are technical, so you got you're an elite group, right? Not many people subscribe to the technical committee because it's hard. I mean, you don't want me to subscribe to that group, but I think the culture one, because it's a human thing. We're all humans, so all the humanists,
Humanists, yes.
yeah, humanists will get together because we're not robots. We're not getting replaced anytime soon. We're just getting extended by AI. I think it'll be one of the most popular groups that will have to. I think it'll immediately evolve into subgroups as well. So yeah, and another thing, just because I see the time, another thing I do encourage people to look at is the paper on the internet governance for the internet. So Don, again, his team wrote a paper. It's called "The Remarkable Internet Governance." Definitely have a read of it. It's really cool because it's again, guys, it's this has been done. Every time I say this, Charles kind of gets mad because he's like, well, the internet is broken in these ways. And Vince Cerf, he came and said, yeah, I know it's not perfect. I'm just saying, if you look at the internet, they were able to also figure out this ecosystem type thing. And it was the United States, right? ARPANET, that gave this over to a group. And if you look at the different groups, I'm thinking ecosystem mapping here. It started with the Internet Society, and then they had the IETF underneath it, and so forth. I just want to take this time to make sure that people do read that paper because it's super instructive of these types of things. But what got me thinking about it is, I don't know that they have any. I bet the Internet Society has some sort of culture code for the internet. Like, and it's just like standard things you should do or not do, kind of similar to our tenants. But I don't think they have like a culture group or anything. And I think AI, if we do this right, can kind of follow suit and maybe establish these. And they probably have their own culture groups as well.
Yeah,
in AI.
I would imagine. I mean, there's
ethics groups
for sure, and it is interesting to see, and I think that's was especially interesting when the internet was coming up. There weren't other games in town. That's what's different now. We are in this era where many different technologies are capturing the human attention in many different ways, and so we in a way have to compete for that attention on what we're doing and on the areas that we're working on. Are the areas that we're working on important enough for people to participate in? And I think that many of the steps that you're doing right now are leading us in that direction. So, if we can come together with a final call to action for the community
Yeah,
here,
sure.
what are we?
Okay. Well, number one, set up the culture group.
Yes,
I think we've heard that one.
Yes.
Going to keep repeating it because it's really important. The ecosystem working group, just give as much support to the dReps as possible right now. So I know that there's a dRep collective that anybody wants to join and help build these interfaces as well. Anybody that's interested in building these types of collaboration systems, just join, I guess, the dRep collective, or not. Maybe I don't know the permissions there, but like.
There's an open group on X, so anyone can join.
Okay.
It's an open group on
An
X.
open group on X. I really think that the ecosystem working group overall, because everything has to commit to chain, right? Like that's cool that the dReps would be doing that which is one component, as we said, but there still needs to be a dedicated working group inside of Intersect that just like owns this whole thing. I'm happy to participate. I'm building BOSS for IO. So our business operating system, I am doing an advanced business operating system, and I'm going to be building a ecosystem operating system, sort of, but it's more like a business operating system with Agalos in the group. I just think that work in Cardano should just keep going in that working group. So that's number two. And then number three is just, I would really be focusing on the budgets right now, understanding. Has it been released yet? It's not, right?
Right. So, I can throw that out there real quick. That's what the expectation right now is that because the Plowman hard fork is official, the 29th we will turn over into fully in the Conway era. So on the 30th, they're going to release the Constitution ratification action, and then we're going to give that about 3 days or so, and then we're going to release the net change limit info action. While that net change limit info action is out, so will the text of the 5 budgets that are being proposed. So it's kind of all will be running simultaneously. So you'll have the Constitution ratification, you'll have the net change limit info action you can vote on, and you'll have the budget that you can review, the budgets plural that you can review to see if there's any concerns, questions, whatever. And obviously we'll be very public during that time frame, making ourselves very, very available. Hopefully the whole budget committee does, so that we're all out there in public getting as much feedback as we can, because we have time until it goes on chain. We can make changes that need to be made. So that's the time frame that if there are any last minute changes that need to be made, that just things that can't be accepted or however it goes, we'll do that. We'll pivot through that, and then once that change limit is approved, then the budgets go on chain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so I'd pay attention to all of that. I'd make sure that you're, especially dReps, of course, right? I'd be paying attention to that. And even if you're not a dRep, it's your mandate to be informed, right? Because you're the one who's deciding who you're delegating to. So that in and of itself takes a bit of analysis. So I'd be paying attention to that. Like, think budgets are sexy. I don't know. Like, try to, like the water, try to convince yourself that budgets are sexy.
That's right.
I don't know. But like, everybody should know how to do budgets. It will help you. The more you understand how these budgets work, it'll help you run your own companies, actually. So I'd be like very interested in the budget process and watching that. And then on the ecosystem side, Catalyst hopefully will get funded as well. I'm sure they're going to have some ecosystem rounds later on for different types of funding for different types of ecosystem projects. Right. So but definitely you could start the culture group now. I think that would be my 3 very large call to actions. Those are very big.
I think those are great. And Tamara Haasen, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you.